Okay, hi everybody. This is going to be a video about how to solo through Djangology. So Djangology is a little bit of a tricky tune in that it is not based on 2-5-1 harmony. It's got its kind of chromatic bass line thing going on. Going on in the bass. Django was really fascinated by these kinds of progressions. Another example that I can think of would be Tears, which is also quite hard to solo through, although it's slower, so that makes it a bit easier. This progression, which is A7/C sharp, C minor 6, G/B, so as like the A, it's a first inversion major chord, and then B flat diminished 7th, A minor, D7, G. These are sort of standard kind of, that's actually kind of a bit of a standard turnaround. You can find it in tunes like Georgia on My Mind. Okay, for example, also Night and Day, and It Was Just One of Those Things by Cole Porter. The progression also features in those tunes. So it is a good idea to learn how to solo over it. I've heard it called the kipper, by the way, which is a good to have a label for it. And kipper is a the sort of thing that you remember because it's a bit silly. And anything that's a bit stupid, you kind of remember right away. Apparently that's how memory experts work. Just like create bizarre images in their head, which help remind them of boring lists of numbers or whatever that nobody who hasn't trained that way could remember. So I think the kipper's a good name for it because there's no way you're going to forget it. Just think about that salty kipper and remember this chord progression. I know it's a bit wrong, but that's part of the reason why it works. Okay, so how do we solo over it then? Well, I just want to quickly talk about the structure of the chord progression because this is a good way to start. And the progression is actually based around just parallel minor tenths moving down by a semitone each time. Don't know what a minor tenth is. It's basically a third, but the top note's been stuck up an octave. So instead of playing this kind of thing, we play. And tenths are great for guitar. Like if you know Blackbird, it's all based around. Well, a lot of it's based around tenths. For example, I'm not actually playing it quite right. Anyway, I won't, that's not really the focus of this lesson, but you get the idea anyway. See, I do know it really. So that is very, very similar harmony to what we're dealing with here. It's just these tenths sliding around. You can have fun doing that, and there's a great resource for sort of solo jazz guitar and stuff. All that kind of stuff. If you look at Martin Taylor's book, he's got loads of stuff about this. Kind of old school harmony, perhaps influenced by stride piano and ragtime and that kind of thing. So that means we've got these two chromatic lines moving down together, and that's the structure of the progression. So we can use that to solo. Beyond just running arpeggios, which is certainly something you should do. You should get a slow metronome on, maybe 60 beats a minute, maybe slower, or 60 for this one. And you go through the arpeggios, and I like to do an arpeggio tone per click, just because then it gives me more flexibility to add in notes afterwards. So A7, C minor 6. Sorry, try not to double notes like I just did. Sorry, what am I doing? Can't talk and do it at the same time. It means I haven't mastered it yet. That's better. Try and sort of mix it up as well, so it's not just going straight up and down. You can do it in eighth notes as well. Excuse me. So that's a little bit too fast. I might want to actually even take the metronome back to 40 or something, which I won't demonstrate now. But that's what you need to do to get sort of an idea of the fretboard. But these sort of as you practice the arpeggios, you'll notice these little chromatic things coming out like that. Okay, so the linking notes between each arpeggio are very important. However, that is good, and it's really important to practice that stuff. But I also think that there's another approach you can take, which is particularly good at the start of a solo before you want to sort of get all your widdly licks out. And if you listen to my version of the tune on the other YouTube video, you'll see that I start the solo with something very much like this, which is just taking the top chromatic line from the tenths and using like some notes from the major scale on top. So I can't remember exactly, but something like this. Actually, I think what I played just then is nicer, so I should have played that instead. But I'll just break it down a little bit. What we're doing is just taking this sort of nice E note, and we go to E flat, and so we're bouncing against A. Kind of related to these sorts of things that you might play. And same thing down the tone. And don't forget about the F sharp. Don't play an F by accident. The more arpeggio based stuff after that. So let's see it. You can use that as a basis of like repeater licks as well. So you can add the other note in from the this moving line kind of coming down, so you can go do this kind of stuff. Okay, that kind of thing, right? And you can build that in with all your arpeggios. Important thing about arpeggios is you don't just want to play them straight up and down, so it gets boring, this kind of thing. It's fine for some stuff, but it's also nice when you're improvising melodically to introduce neighbour tones. So the classic one for most Django people is to go below. I use that one to death for sure. And then if you do it underneath a B flat diminished 7th chord, you get this. So let me just try and get the right chord first of all. I'd usually play it like this, right? It's good to do it with 2 fingers. That's how Django would have done it. And also you get more strength with 2 fingers as well. And then you go, arpeggio. And all that stuff's, kind of thing, right? Just running those possibilities. And if you're doing a neighbour tone coming from above, you want to use a note from the key. So you've got to know your major scale really to do this properly. So don't just be able to play it, but know it in every position, and where the notes are. So when you're playing upper neighbour tones, it could be this pattern, for example. That's nice, and then when you get to the the minor 7th, C minor 6, it gets a little bit more complicated because that chord doesn't belong to the key, but you can still use the same approach. That's nice, you see. And then for diminished, you can just go a half step below, whole step above, so using the diminished scale effectively. That kind of thing. That's quite nice. Yeah, I really like that. And then actually for this one, and that's nice when you walk down to the 7th. It's very old school. Another thing I do, which is kind of beyond the scope of this particular lesson, is I use a lot of the Barry Harris sort of added note scales. So for example on a D7 you might play something like this. Just to get the notes on the beat. You know, and it gets a bit more complicated when you're changing chords. You have to use a different formula. But all that stuff is available from Barry Harris's website. And if you, because they're very involved courses, if you just want to kind of dip your toe in the water, it's probably a good idea to get the book Talk Jazz by Ronnie Ben-Hur, who is firstly a guitar player and secondly a student of Barry Harris. So he's a good person for people, you know, who play guitar, who want to get into Barry Harris's ideas about music. And I found that stuff really useful. You know, it's kind of more bebop era than swing era, but it works very well. You know, I think bebop language sounds great on a Macaferry, and obviously it's compatible with the kind of harmony you get in swing standards. So, you know, and Django tunes and stuff. So you can really use that stuff. So I'd recommend that as well. One last thing actually, which I didn't mention, is kind of just like the dot to dot approach. So if you've got like a G major triad arpeggio, you can just go. It's very visual on the guitar, right? You know, it's like, wraparounds as well. Very good to practice all that stuff. There's all kinds of different patterns and different combinations you can come up with. But I'd say as a basis, understand what the chord progression is doing in terms of the voice leading, how it's moving, where the chromatics are, what the chromatic lines are within the chord progression, and base your solos on them, and then run the arpeggios and notice any little joins you see going from chord to chord. And then after that, learn to embellish the arpeggios with the neighbour tones. And once you've done that, if you want to, go on and learn how to use scales. But I would say, like, with this kind of style of music, it's all about the melody, and that's what I love about Django's playing. He's such a gifted melodic improviser. It's just that kind of don't forget a few triplets and little twiddles and stuff to make it sound better. You know, all that kind of stuff. It's all really really a rich and sort of melodic language, even if you don't use any fancy stuff. Anyway, hope that's of some help, and that's given me a few ideas to work on. Take care and see you soon. Bye.